Brilliant. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Richard Merrin, and welcome to the second Optimize webinar. The first one in January apparently was quite the success, so Sarah's made the foolish decision to invite me back to chair the next one. And there will be some faces that are familiar to those of you who were on the January webinar from some familiar faces from that one. But we're also welcoming a new guest along today, Mark Olding from Mimecast. So before we get on to the questions, and the theme again this month is peace of mind when it comes to IT infrastructure, I'm going to ask our guests to do a quick introduction on who they are and where they're from. So I'm going to start with Mark because you're the newbie.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Mark Olding. I work in the pre-sales team at Mimecast, but I've been in security for far too many years to think about now. At places like Symantec, Sophos, Kaspersky, and BlackBerry. So quite a lot of experience in quite a lot of places.
Brilliant, Mark. Thank you. And I'm going to ask Brian and then Rob just to do some quick intros for themselves here as well. Brian.
Okay, yeah. Good morning. I'm Brian Sibley. I'm a solutions architect at Espria. So I think anyone who's on last month saw me then. My job involves basically talking to our clients to understand their business problems and then working with our partners to basically come up with some solutions to address those requirements. My primary focus is on cloud and the associated security solutions around them.
Brilliant, Brian. Thank you. And Rob, finally, yourself.
Yeah, good morning. Rob Smith, work for Xerox. My role is I'm responsible for business development for all of our software and service offerings via our channel partners.
Thank you. Now, I would just like to remind all the guests who've joined the webinar today, if you wish to ask a question, please do so in the chat. I've got a series of questions which I'm going to throw at our guests and do my very best to try and trip them up this time. But last time they answered all the questions perfectly. So I'm going to turn to Brian first of all, and this is a question about infrastructure, and this is about how, once it is in place, how do you effectively how do you scale up or down?
Okay, interesting one. Very, very generic. Yeah. Because the answer to that is it depends. Right. I mean, for people who joined us last month will know my focus is cloud. So if you've got a cloud infrastructure, then that makes your life much easier because that's designed to scale per user. And that absolutely then will scale to meet your needs. So you can scale up, you can scale down, and also just a different charge based on what you're using. If you have a physical environment, also that's a little more difficult. You're going to ideally overspec the environment when you first put it in, but then there comes a point where that one more user is going to be one user too many, and it's too much for that system. So yeah, that's the issue you're going to have, and I think the security systems around that obviously once again depends how they're working, but as you get larger, obviously your security requirements will become more complex, and so then you may need more security systems to deal with that.
I mean, you've raised a really important point about security, so it just seems fair that I bring in Mark from Mimecast to give us his views on that particular issue in terms of scaling a security suite, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the answer is very similar to what Brian was saying there. It really depends on your environment, whether it is cloud-based and whether your solutions are cloud-based. And if they are, then obviously cloud-native solutions are designed to flex. So if you do need to be bigger, if you need to be smaller, then you can do that with your infrastructure, and your security can kind of go with you on that. As to what kind of solutions you might be looking for, really, obviously, I work for an email security company, so I would say that's a great place to start. But you need sort of that in place. You need the layered approach that I think was spoken about on last month's webinar. Really a good endpoint, and obviously things like firewalls in place as well. As you get bigger, those things remain important, but you might want to start looking at more complex solutions like XDR, and turn from reactive security into proactive security, where you're actually hunting out threats rather than waiting to see if you block them.
Thank you. Rob, do you have an opinion on this?
Well, obviously only from a print point of view, so
Yeah.
not quite the infrastructure that the others will talk about. But actually, for everybody, security is a massive conversation. And from our side, we very much look at how we can offer security-related services. So, for example, where we're looking at the devices, where we're looking at users, where we're looking at documents, if we have our users that are working from home, we need to be able to monitor that activity or provide them access to the documents, then we'll look at modular subscription-based services and products that allow for that environment. We can add as many users as we need to facilitate remote working. If the rules change and everybody has to come into the office and we no longer need to provide remote access to the documents, we turn it off. So the whole point behind what we're trying to do is to allow, the benefit of cloud is that it is flexible. We're not stuck with the amount of infrastructure that we needed on day one. And we're trying to do the same with our services. We make them modular, but guided around devices, users, and documents.
You touched on a very, very interesting point there, and that's about employees within an organization. And, I know from my own experience that arguably one of the biggest cyber risks in my business are my own employees working remotely or downloading things that I don't know about, and shadow IT, which seems to be sprawling everywhere. I would really like to understand how you can ensure that you've got the appropriate training in place for employees within an organization. I'm going to start with you, Mark, on that one, I think, and then I'm going to broaden that one out, because I think the issue of training and when it's appropriate and when to use it and how to enforce it, I think, is a really important issue.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Training is really important. We talk about users often as being the weakest part of security, but a well-trained workforce can be, the strongest part of security. There's a term kicking around, the human firewall, which is, a well-trained staff body who can, protect themselves. It's also about trying to gauge who are our strong people and where our weak spot is. And it's thought around 8% of people in an organization are kind of your security weak spot. So it's about kind of understanding that and understanding sort of who those weaker people are, and then providing better training or more training for them without kind of forcing the entire body of staff to undergo that same level of training. When it comes to the training themselves, obviously the majority of threats come in over email, so phishing simulators are always a good place to start. That's also a good way to sort of understand, as a finger in the air, kind of where people are. And then when it comes to the actual training itself, I think that the days of anybody sitting and watching a video for an hour and paying attention to it are probably long gone. So you need sort of bite-sized chunks. Let's introduce concepts and then build on those concepts over time. Try and make it engaging, preferably funny, because humor is easier to remember.
Yeah.
And it's about applying to people as individuals. So yes, you are an employee of this company, but outside of work, what are you doing? So you're on social media, you have your own laptop, you have your mobile device, you're using email. So any training that you can give on a personal level kind of goes way beyond the bounds of, this is where I work and this is what I do at work, to this is how I behave as an individual. And then that behavior becomes inherent. And then it's just kind of the way you act and the way that you behave. So I think the right training, like I say, that speaks to you on an individual level can protect you in and outside of work, which again is more engaging.
You came up with a very interesting data point there. You identified 8% of employees are classed as security weak spots.
Yeah.
I'm interested to understand how that figure came about. If you can give any, because that's almost 10% of a workforce. That's not
Yeah, so that's kind of based on Mimecast's research, based on what we see in companies that we deal with as an average. Weak spots is probably a bad term to use. That's my terminology, not industry terminology. But yeah, it's based on kind of what we see. We offer awareness training products, and kind of based on that and the results from that training, that 8% is thought to be roughly
Around
where,
about that. Okay.
yeah, where most companies are.
Brian, would you argue that when you know with your customers that you're seeing that sort of situation, and that, you know, training is required but very gently handled?
I think, yeah, Mark's absolutely spot on. It's sort of the days of putting people in a classroom every month and saying you've got to do cyber training. It just turns people off. You know, no one likes that. So it is having that bite size as and when approach definitely is what you want, and it's just building that ongoing awareness, as Mark really, that's a really key point, that, you know, people at home as well. It's not just when you're at work, you need to have this awareness all the time. And I was actually dealing with a client only this week where they actually had a very sophisticated phishing email attack, but it was basically foiled by the users. The users actually spotted it and said, "Oh, this doesn't look quite right. It's incredibly good, but it doesn't look quite right." And you know, that had got through lines of defence that were there, and it was, say, the human firewall actually did work. So there's a lot to be said for it.
So from the Xerox perspective, Rob, are you seeing the same sort of issues and same sort of challenges?
Yes, so obviously in relation to print, not as much of a threat as email. I think everybody's aware that email is the biggest area, but nonetheless, how we use and access data can and is leading to fines, certainly from a compliance point of view. The information we've got shows that of all breaches, 90% are caused by humans where print is related. So some of that's deliberate, but the vast majority is actually completely innocently by mistake, just following processes as guided, and then not realizing that those processes are actually against, for example, GDPR compliance. You know, and there are websites out there that you say about, the question was, how do we provide training and make sure people are aware? One of the things we actually do, Mark mentioned about videos. There's an online video. If you were to Google 28,000 printers hacked, there's a short video that will show you how this is a security company who highlighted how MFDs that are being used to scan to things like Google and OneDrive, external websites, hackers are now using these or seeing these as a potential on-ramp into the organization. So it's about, you know, to the trainer we provide, we actually play this video, and suddenly everyone who watches it's like, I never realized actually how much of a potential risk my printing devices can be. The second one is there's a website called GDPR Enforcement Tracker. And if you have a look on there, you will see you know, just how often fines are being made in relation to GDPR. There's one on there from December. The Ministry of Defence, they got fined 400,000. There's quite a well-known one from last year. TikTok were fined 14 million because of not protecting information about children. And so the risk is we look at those and go, well, 400,000, 14 million, my organisation is much smaller. There was one I was looking at this morning. There's a company in Europe who were fined 3,000 euros. But the link between all three of them, when it gives you the details as to how they were fined or why they were fined, insufficient technology to ensure information is secure is the reason behind all three of those examples. Wow. So we use these things to say, look, the fines are happening. The videos are there to show where the risks are. And quite often common sense will then prevail. Okay, so as an employee, how do I play my part? I understand why we need this technology. How do you need me to use it so that I'm not presenting or providing that potential risk?
So for the guests actually sitting listening to this webinar, I'm just going to ask you just to very quickly repeat the locations of both of those resources you've referred to so that they can scrabble around with a bit of paper and a pen to write them down.
So if you Google 28,000 printers hacked, you should find a video.
Brilliant.
And then the website is the GDPR Enforcement Tracker.
I'm so going to look at that one because GDPR
it's quite
is
interesting.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we were obviously aware, when was it, 2017, 2018, when GDPR came into play. And there was a lot of noise at the time, quite rightly. And then it kind of went away. And we heard about British Airways got a massive fine, 160 million. And the perception when you talk to people was it's only the big guys, it's only the big corporates that are going to get fined. And then you actually look through this website and you can filter by country, you can filter by topic, you can filter by the reasoning. And then you see companies are being fined as little as 3,000 euros because they are not protecting customers' information, their email address, their credit card, their personal address. You know, there's all sorts of different things and reasons why that if we get caught, we're going to get fined.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, look, I'm going to jump onto an important point, because I think this flows, and this is about cyber insurance, because I think this is an appropriate topic to flow on. I mean, I'm going to start with Brian. Do you think cyber insurance is worth it, or does it actually make you a bit of a sitting duck target?
Okay. That's an interesting one. I think whether it's worth it's probably a moot point. It's like any insurance, isn't it? I think there's a lot of business now where they can't trade with other organisations if they don't have cyber insurance. So whether it's worth it or not, they have to have it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a difficult one, and obviously if you do get breached, which unfortunately the risk is high. At the end of the day, we're in the world now where if you don't know if you've been breached, you probably have. So obviously if you have then got the insurance and they will help you recoup some of your losses, that's a good thing to have.
I think, Mark, I'll bring you in on that one if that's okay.
Yeah, I think just in support of what Brian was saying there, I think in the modern world we talk about breaches in terms of it's when, not if. So it's almost a foregone conclusion that's going to happen to some level, and having insurance is going to help soften that blow a little bit. I think you still need to take responsibility, and I think that understand your insurance policy. I know a lot of policies will look at not just are you using particular types of security, but which vendors have you chosen to go to, and if you're using the right vendors that they recognize as being best of breed, then you get cheaper insurance. So it's worth understanding, from an insurance perspective, which product should I be using. I think also a negative of insurance has been the pay the ransom attitude of people that seems to have come about. When ransomware was first in the news, it was kind of, make sure you've got backups, don't pay the ransom, just restore from your latest backup. Whereas I think now people are more likely to pay that ransom because we can just blame it on insurance, right? So, I mean, that has made the problem grow instead of disappear. If everybody from the word go just went, no, we're not paying, ransomware probably would have gone away by now. The fact that you can claim on insurance means that we've actually seen a growth. And again, based on research from Mimecast, around 2/3 of companies have been hit by ransomware. So again, huge growth in that area. I'm not saying it's down to cyber insurance, but cyber insurance has played a part in that.
Interesting comment in from Andrew on the chat. I attended a session with some cyber insurers the other day, and it seems that most policies these days require good technical controls to already be in place, i.e. you can't get insurance to cover not having good practices and good protection systems. Otherwise, the policy wouldn't pay out anyway. A view I'm sure you will probably all agree with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to change the subject now. I'm going to move to the issue of IT talent. And this is something that I probably would expect a number of the people on here listening to us would probably want to get a bit more of an understanding. And the core question I've got is, how do you best attract the very best IT talent into a team when it comes to issues like, cloud computing, AI, even data analytics and others? Brian, I'm going to start that one with you.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a key point. I think the next generation coming through, they're all online, they're all using social media, they're all using WhatsApp, things like that. They don't want to go into a workplace where they have to use this old-fashioned thing called email. It's not something they want to do. They want to be working on instant messaging. They want to be having meetings like we are at the moment, working from home, not being forced to go to an office. So by having these tools, you are attracting those people. You're making yourself look like a modern, progressive organisation. And obviously, if you are adapting the latest things like AI, which I'm sure we'll get onto later on, it's obviously the phrase of the moment. But obviously, having that sort of thing in your business, not only is it going to maximise the efficiency of your organisation, it's also going to make it a better place to work for the talent coming in. They're going to say, yeah, you're a progressive organisation, you're using the new technology to the benefit of the business. It's somewhere that's worth working.
Yeah. And Rob, do you have an opinion on this as well?
Not as much because of the nature of IT talent. However, I think if you take the word or the phrase IT out of that, how do we attract talent altogether? And I would agree with everything that Brian is saying.
Yeah.
If you've got the choice of two companies that are offering a similar package, and one organisation is using technology that's somewhat dated, and the other is using modern technology, it allows or accommodates flexible working. We can go and do school run. We can change our hours. We can work when it suits us, which is very much what a lot of people are expecting now, especially in London. I think those organisations that are looking forward to having the latest technology are going to be far more appealing than companies that are trying to work the way that we did 20 years ago.
I mean, it's a very, very valid point. I'm working from home today, and the rest of my staff are in the office, so it just shows it works for all of us, doesn't it? But actually, I'm going to come back to you, Brian, here, because I think there's a really important question that needs to be asked, and that is, how can a managed service provider, and I'm asking you because you're from Espria, how can an MSP help end user organisations attract that talent?
Yeah, I think that's very much where we can help organisations. It's having that knowledge and experience in the technologies. So certainly when working for smaller organisations, IT isn't their priority. They want to do what they do as a business, and the IT is there as a tool to get the job done. So by having an MSP to go to, they can offer advice and help on what should they be using, how's it going to benefit their business. And we can also, give them access to the right frameworks and even the right structures so they can try things out and implement them in their organisation.
Thank you. I'm gonna come on to that question about artificial intelligence now, if I may. That was a nice, neat segue, gents. Thank you. AI, artificial intelligence, clearly one of the big buzzwords at the moment, and I think it's set to grow. It's set to dominate. I want to understand, and I'm going to start with you, I guess, Mark. How do we ensure that AI aligns with business strategy and the objectives of a business?
Yeah, I think the thing with AI and any other buzzword is that it is a buzzword, right? And I think you need to step back from that, understand, what your business needs, what security is required, and look for the solution that suits you best. Now, most solutions in security now will claim to or have some AI in them, but I don't think that should be your focus when you're choosing a solution. You need to look at sort of, okay, so what's happened in the last year? So we've been attacked 20 times. And, 15 of those were business email compromise where somebody was trying to get us to move money. But we have, security in place that any transfers of money over £500 require 2 people to sign off on it. So those are all cool. Then we got hit by ransomware once, but it ended up costing us, £20,000 or whatever. So what we need to do is understand how we can best fight that threat. And whether or not that is a solution with AI, like I say, most of them will claim to have now, or not. It's really looking at the marketplace and understanding which solution fits you best and meets those needs best, rather than which one has the latest bells and whistles or uses the latest technology.
And Rob, from your perspective, how are you seeing the rise of AI?
The big one is data, availability of data. There's 2 areas where we can look at artificial intelligence. The first one is the information that we've got and being able to make informed decisions. The second one is how we can use technology to try and automate the things that we're doing daily. So there's your AI bit. And then from the business goals, most times, most customers we speak to, the business goals tend to be quite similar. So first of all, productivity. How can we get more? So more revenue, manufacture more products, deliver more consignments. How can we do more as an organization with the workforce that we've got? How can we make sure that we are secure and that we are compliant to regulation? And how can we achieve our sustainability goals or our CSR targets? So that's where the data comes in. Where are the gaps? Where are the opportunities? And then where the technology comes in is where we can then start to automate these things. So remove the human. We talked about security earlier on, 90% being human related. And then the benefit there is actually all three of those. If we look at something from a security point of view, and we eliminate the paper to make it more secure, well, actually, we can move that information more quickly. We could probably process more orders as a result. So we're more productive. At the same time, eliminating the paper has a sustainability benefit as well.
Interesting. Now I'm going to put the same question to Brian, because he will have maybe, I'm hoping, a different perspective of this from being from an MSP, but I'd be interested to hear what your opinion is on this issue, Brian.
Yeah, I think, to say, I'm in line with what Mark was saying. Really, it's very much AI is a tool. It's just another tool. It's the current, the new tool in everyone's toolkit. But you absolutely need to look and see what is the business requirement. Why do you need this? I mean, if you look at sort of, I suppose, probably the highest profile one in my arena is Microsoft Copilot. They're all over everything at the moment, saying Copilot is the best thing since sliced bread. You've got to have it. But it's a tool, and it's working out where that will benefit your business. So it's a bit like most people buy Office, and they use the Office suite. So they're going to use Outlook, they're going to use Word, they're going to use Excel, maybe a bit of PowerPoint. But you wouldn't buy Visio or Project for everyone, because they are more specific. And I think that's much the same with Copilot. There are certain roles in your business that will probably massively benefit from that automation that AI can bring. And there are other roles in the business where, to be honest, it would be a waste of money. So it's just working out what it's going to do. And I think the other key thing to bear in mind, it isn't that, silver bullet that's going to solve all your problems.
No.
It can save you a lot of time, but you still need that human skill and experience to check the results it gives you and verify they're valid in the context that you're aiming for. So it will save all that donkey work, all the research, all the things like that, but you still need that experienced human to actually proofread and verify it is actually what you want before you let it out in front of your clients, for example.
Those ion jobs, as they are known. And those human elements of it. And actually, I think there's an interesting point on that one. And this I think will broadly be the last question I'm going to ask of the three of you today. And this is about the issue of compliance, because I think there's a neat segue in on this point. At the last webinar, we sort of touched on how compliance could be a key differentiator for businesses, as opposed to just being a nasty stick to beat people over the head with. And I'm wondering, in your experience, have you seen IT teams leveraging compliance to really differentiate a business in the marketplace? And I guess I'm going to start with Rob on that one.
So again, looking at this from a document point of view, when we look at it, to talk about compliance, first of all, which format of a document is going to be more secure? A piece of paper or a digital version of it? So we want to try and be as digital as we can do. And this is where we need to have a look at the document processes. And one of the things we talk quite heavily about is it's not the volume of print that matters, it's the reason behind it. And we know 90% of the reason is related to a process. It's processing that order, that invoice, or manufacturing, whatever it might be. So if we can find a way that through digitizing that workflow, that we improve on the security and the compliance point of view. So we've locked down that data, and we talked about GDPR earlier on. We're not leaving information open to be accessed in an incorrect manner. You then, as I mentioned before, you get that consequential benefit quite often in other areas. So very much with paper, it's an easy one to understand, because with no paper, you've got a sustainable benefit, right? So 8,000 trees means that we save 8,000 pages per tree that's used. So by eliminating all of that paper, we have the sustainability benefit as well. And we also get that productivity benefit. As I mentioned before, we can move the information faster, we can complete more tasks.
An incredibly powerful argument there. And I'm sure, Brian, that's probably something that you would totally agree with.
Absolutely. And I can probably take it a little bit further as well, actually. Obviously, Rob's at the sort of the forefront there of turning paper into digital images. And I think what we can look at as well is if we are adhering to regulations and things like GDPR that Mark was talking about earlier on, there is also requirements there to not keep everything, to basically be deleting data when it goes beyond the date. So as we touched on last month, the data centers are becoming very, very efficient for the cloud services, for example, but there's still a large amount of CO2 being generated by storing data, literally by having servers running to hold all your data. So of course the benefit there is if you're storing less data because you're adhering to regulations, that's less CO2 being generated because you've got less data to store. So that kind of gives you a sort of virtuous circle really there, where you're not cutting down trees, and you're also producing less carbon at the end of it to store that data.
Mark, do you want to add anything before I go for the last question?
No, I don't think I really have much to add to that. I think Brian and Rob have done a great job of answering the question.
Brilliant. Well, listen, actually, that point about environmental and sustainability, I want a quick yes or no answer. No waffle. I'm going to do the hardline politicians questioning. It's a simple yes or no. We're all working to net zero, but do you think it's achievable in IT terms by the year 2030? Brian?
Probably.
Rob?
Yes, because net zero means to reduce as much as you can or to offset. So if you cannot remove it, then you can offset to counteract it. So yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. Mark?
I'm going to be optimistic and say yes.
Brilliant. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you to everybody who's been on the call. Are there any questions out there that we may be able to answer? Otherwise, I will call it a day, and to say thank you to everybody for attending, and a big thank you to my guests today, Mark, Brian, and Rob. And I guess we'll see you all in a month. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Take care.
Everyone.